Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation from a previous lesson of the fifth chapter in the book of Matthew. We covered the first 12 verses, which are known as the Beatitudes, so named for the Latin translation of the Greek word for blessing. Beatitudes abound throughout the Bible. Wherever there is a blessing pronounced before something, that is definitionally a beatitude. But we read of the Beatitudes, which are so radical and revolutionary to the way of world and religion. The originality of thought in here is, and the wisdom expressed therein is, in my personal witness of the author's divine identity. These are so profound that no finite mind. These are so counterintuitive to the imaginations of the natural man that whoever said these things had to be divine and had to be sinless. But because there's just so much to cover in the fifth chapter, we're going to try and condense the preamble to the minimum. We don't know how far we're going to get to it, but the Beatitudes open with the first three of them are defined by paradox. Blessed are the poor in spirit, because theirs is the kingdom of the heavens. Blessed are those who mourn, because they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, because they shall inherit the earth. A paradox, by definition, is a statement uniting and combining two ostensibly irreconcilable polarities. So the poor in spirit having the exalted abode of the kingdom of heaven is just like the meek having the earth. These are the people the earth walks over, but they are promised the worth. So there is a paradox, and when you're mourning, that no one can comfort, but when you mourn over sin, then you feel the healing medicinal qualities of repentance, and that is the comfort that he speaks of. The next two verses are principles. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, because they shall be filled. Blessed are the compassionate, because they shall obtain compassion. So the principle is, if you pursue that which you want to be satisfied with, your appetite, your indulgence, you will have what you seek. And if you seek after righteousness, no harm can come from that. That is a principle, not a promise, because we read that the righteous often pay the price of persecution by the end of the Beatitudes. If you want to obtain mercy, you have to show it. This is consistent with what we read of in the sixth chapter of forgiveness and a few other things. So the principle of karma, the karmic boomerang, the law of cause and effect. If you want to be treated one way, you have to deserve it by being treated the way that you wish to be treated. So no harm can come from giving mercy if you expect to receive mercy. And then the final, or actually the next two are promises, and actually come to think of it, blessed, verse 6 actually falls in the category of promise, now that you can review that. Blessed are the clean in heart, because they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, because they shall be called sons of God. So there are conditions to these promises, but they are there, and they are in simple language. And who wouldn't want to see God? That is the object of all of our faiths, all of our objectives, all of our lofty is, that is the goal, that is the objective, that is why we are here. And to be called the Son of God, who could argue with that? Who wouldn't want to be that? But we have to be peacemakers. We have to wage peace in a world that is hostile to God and God's people, and that invites persecution and demands it. So the next three verses, we're not going to read them all out loud, except for the 12th one. But it just, he says, rejoice and be glad, because your reward in the heaven is great, for in this they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So the next three verses kind of return to the paradox, because you're being blessed for righteousness' sake. So first off, you're not being persecuted for anything besides the cause of Christ and righteousness' sake. And you are spreading and inheriting and bringing and experiencing the kingdom of the heaven where you are, and bringing it where you with you. And blessed when every insult and invective is hurled against you. We're going to read about that and the degeneration of anger that comes. But to rejoice and be glad, to be glad in the persecutions, not because of. So that is to say, in spite of. And the prophets are going to, key to is critical. So it's the customary classification is to join verse 13 and 16, but because of the profundity and the volume of the world, of the wisdom that could be extracted from these 12 verses, I spent that much time there. So we're going to take it off in the 13th, and we're not going to approach this. We're going to see how it lies where we will end. But the language transitions from explicit, unambiguous, it means what it says, direct, literal. He's saying poor in spirit. He says what he means what he says. Now he uses figurative of metaphorical terms such as salt and light in cities. But verse 13, you are the salt of the earth, but it is the salt becomes tasteless. How shall it be seasoned? For it is no longer of any use to be thrown out and to be trodden down by men. Salt was a preservative and a life sustainer in the ancient world. Wars and economies revolved around it, and wars were fought over it. The Crusades were just a quest for salt. So it did have some value, but if it loses its flavor, it is useless. So as we are out there in the world, flavoring the world, bringing our stamp, we have to be careful not to allow its influence to infiltrate and overcome us. We have to put our stamp decisively and firmly in the world. Because what good is salt if it is useless, if it is ineffective? So Christianity is a conservative religion. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. We have to preserve what is best and spice what is new. It's a conservative, but it's also a creative religion. You are the light of the world. It is impossible for a city to be hidden on the mountain. So light, we are not literal light. We are not, vessels of luminosity, but we exist as lighthouses functioning in a world that is lost and fallen and gone astray. We exist to give it a guide and post and direction. And the point of a light is to be seen by men, because as salt that is flavorless is useless, so too is a light that does not have a stand or a physical advantage in getting out its light. But we are the light of the world. He says the same thing about himself. This is one of the 7 I am statements in John's Gospel. He is the light of the world, 8:12 and 9:5, and he is the king he is the royal democrat, the king who shares his court with his subjects. So if he is the light of the world, that means we who are his are also called to be the same as the light of the world. Not in the capital sense word. He is the capital L light of the world, but we are to be as he is. So he was the light of the world, and we are to be his light in the world that is lost and fallen astray, that he is trying to win back. But we have to make ourselves, so unambiguous, so proud, so unashamed, so out in the open, because we have to be visible as a city. Now, if we could see a Christian city, that would be unlike it, but that is what we are called to be, because that is not the reality in the world we live. So we are called to a higher reality, a higher plane of living, a higher plane of existence, to create the city by being all you can be, to be the citizen in that city, even though the world that it is in is alien and hostile to the city we are trying to build. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it shines to all those in the house. So the point and purpose of having a source of light is to let it shine and be seen and be useless and effective, not to be concealed, dampened, or diminished in any way, shape, and form. So that it would defeat the purpose of a homeowner to have light, which would have been that they lived in pre-electric light ages, so light would have been done differently than them. But they certainly wouldn't have done a candle. They wouldn't have hidden it under a concealment of cover or anything like that. They would have gotten it out on the lampstand. That was the place where they put the lamp in order for it to shine, so that the house could be lit by its light. And we have to be the same way in the world. Let your light so shine before men, so that you see your good works and praise your Father who is in the heavens. Praise your Father. That is the key. That is the point of the passage. That is why we do what we do, so the Father can be praised. It's not about us. It never is about us. It is about the one we serve, the one we represent, the one we are trying to bring people to. Let him be praised through you. And let us decrease so that he can increase in us. Let us be diminished in order that he may be honored, glorified, and praised. So he is the controlling element, but it is our light. Let your light shine. And he will give us that light if we are submitted to his purposes to shine before men. It is literally never more than a prayer or a way when you are walking in his will and fulfilling his purposes. But Father in the heaven, now that phrase appears 17 times or something similar. Our Father who art in heaven, 17 times in the Gospel of Matthew. I think once or twice in Matthew and Mark, and not at all in John. So that is a distinctly Matthean term, the Heavenly Father. An interesting fact about the religion of Islam: of the 99 names that that Allah is known by, Father is not one. He is a being so utterly transcendent as to be devoid of a fatherly concern for his children. Verse 17 is important. Now, this marks where most, biblical divisions would constitute a distinct narrative transition. This is his relationship to the law. So he goes above and beyond and transcends the law of Moses, and his relation to the law was an interesting question, and it was a source of controversy because the upholders and preservers of the law thought he was an enemy who was out to destroy them. But he sets the record straight. He says, I'm not here to destroy the law. I'm here to fulfill it. Everything in the law and prophets that you read points to me. I am the law and the prophets. I am the fulfillment. Do not think that I came to destroy the law or the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. His relationship to the law was an interesting one. He was born under the law, Galatians 4:4. He lived under the law. He fulfilled the law. His life occurred in the fifth dispensation, and his death unleashed the sixth dispensation, but also the prophecies. So everything in the law, the typologies, the symbolisms point to him, as do all the prophetic echoes. He is the Messiah to come, and he does not come to destroy. Now, his relationship to the law has to be understood in the law's three central components, or the three main components of the Mosaic law, which were the moral, the civil, and the ceremonial. The moral is included, but certainly not limited to the Decalogue that is binding in every generation. We have to live by those laws, every single one of them. But, we're going to read that he goes above and beyond first murder, and then then adultery, and at least what we're going to cover today. But also the moral law is, what God commands, thou shalt, that we have to take that seriously. You have to take that literally. But then there is the civil law, which is if there's a punishment attached, that is usually a civil or secular law, which was unique to the covenant nation of, we're talking about the Old Testament law, that is unique to the Hebrew people, a no longer existing people. So their laws are not our laws. Their laws are far more draconian than our laws. So, the death penalty is just a recourse, a natural reflex recourse of action there. It is instinctive almost. So because of the, now some of their laws may apply to our society, but not exactly. So that is the yes and no. If in answer to the question, did the Messiah destroy, is the law still binding, since he came to fulfill it? And we have got to explain the first two. The third is the ceremonial, which is the sacrificial system. He is the one and done finality, the atonement, the capital letter A, the spotless, sinless Son of God, to whom all the paschal lambs and all the animal sacrifices that were slaughtered in mass in the Jewish religion pointed to. He was the fulfillment of that. After that, it was no longer necessary for any animals to be slaughtered. And of course, the temple destroyed some 40 years after his passing, although there are some minority sects in Judaism that do continue the practice of animal sacrifice. But as for the prophet, he was a prophet, and he was more than a prophet. He was the fulfillment of prophecy. He was the standard prophet, and he was a fulfiller and not a destroyer of the Jewish religion, which it kind of serves as the acorn of the tree of Christianity. So it had to be destroyed in the sense that an acorn, a tree, will have to destroy the embryo in order to grow. For truly I say to you, till the heavens and the earth shall pass away, one jot or one little tittle shall by no means pass from the law till all be done. That is a long time, and that is an exact demand. So, the heavens and the earth, they're going to be here certainly longer than us, but one day they will pass away, the new heaven, new earth, new Jerusalem. But until that day, the law is still binding in its minutia, the yod, the tittle, the iota. Every I every dot above an I, every cross of the T matters, and until it all shall be done. So that was done in him, but he's also has a more extensive duration. So what he's talking about is the moral law. Now, we are taught to walk and live in the Holy Spirit, and between the Spirit and the law, there is no contradiction, because if you are living and abiding in the Spirit, then the law is unnecessary, as Paul makes plain in the 5th chapter in the book of Galatians. Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, he shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Pretty strict standard. He is not playing around. He is not making. He was the sinless one. He observed the law that his opponents accused him of trying to destroy. He alone was the one who was born without sin, lived without sin, and died without sin. And because he was constitutionally capable of being the king of the kingdom, which he established by his blood. So this is the kingdom constitution in the Sermon on the Mount, especially the early portion. But, at one point later, he says that John the Baptist was the greatest among men born of women, and yet he who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. So, but if you teach and do and live the word that you obey and you enact and that you teach and you instruct, then you shall be called great in that blessed abode. For I say to you that unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall by no means enter into the kingdom of the heaven. This is the minimal standard, the righteousness of the scribes and the Pharisees. The scribes and the Pharisees were the who's who and the what's of the day of the religion. These guys were it. They had it made. They were the establishment. And then came this itinerant preacher without any formal credentials who spoke with authority. These men quoted authority, but he spoke with authority. And he's saying that unless you are more righteous than they are, these were the public exemplars and standards, but they had a very external righteousness based on the minutiae, the additional injunctions that were unauthorized, that they took it upon themselves to add to the law on top of the law of Moses. They added to the law of Moses in an express violation of what we read of in Deuteronomy 12, 4:2, 12:32, Proverbs 36, and Revelation 22, 17, 19. They didn't have revelation, but they had the other one. So if they were in fact, the ones who were doing the laws that they were teaching, they would not impose additional burdens, which were heavy to behold, but his yoke is light. For I say to you, you heard that it was said by those of old, you shall not murder. Whoever murders shall be liable to the judgment. So he says you heard that it was said. He doesn't say it was written. He is not appealing to the written authority, although you shall not murder is written. But what he says after that is just an extra scriptural injunction that would have been in currency then. So that the murder demands a punishment and a judgment is self-evident. It's just, you shall not murder. Of course, there has to be a penalty for that and a judgment. That is only self-evident. So the Hebrews were certainly not unique in having this standard, the moral law of Moses. Now what he does is raise the bar. And the final 5 of the righteous, there are 6 righteous commandments. So the 10 commandments, to reiterate, the first one is monotheism, thou shalt not have any gods before me. The second one is anti-idolatry, thou shalt not make any graven image or bow down before him. The third one is not blaspheming, thou shalt not take the sacred name in vain. The fourth and the fifth are positive, thou shalt observe the Sabbath and keep it holy. Thou shalt honor and respect thy mother and your father, in order that your land may be long in the land. And as Paul points out in Ephesians, this is the commandment with the promise. The remaining 5 of the righteous, now the division of the sacred and the righteous begins in the 5th one. The sacred ones govern our relationship with God. What comes after in the 5th, our relationship with our parents. So what succeeds that in the law, the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, are what constitute righteousness, and they are 5 thou shalt nots, and they are presented in the degree of their seriousness. Thou shalt not murder, that is the most serious one. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not lie, and then thou shalt not covet. And the 10th and final one alone is attitudinal. And if you, that is key, because if you cut, adultery begins in coveting. One of the things listed in the laws of Moses, as he presents it, the 10 commandments, is thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. And that's also, stealing begins with coveting, and then you can lie to protect it. So it's really a chain reaction. But in the order that he presents it, in he does murder, and then adultery in degrees of severity, and then vows, which also have an attitudinal one that are missing, and he provides them. So he begins with murder, and anger are the moral equivalent as he sees it. But I say to you that whoever is wroth with his brother without a cause shall be liable to the judgment, and whoever says to his brother Raca shall be liable to the Sanhedrin, but whoever says you fool shall be liable to the fire of Gehenna. Anger, let not the sun go down on the wrath. The wrath is the sign of a fool, the dead giveaway, according to the book of Proverbs. And to be angry without cause is foolish and wicked. There is such a thing as righteous anger, but humanly speaking, it's just not there. Our anger is always selfish and petty, and often without cause, and this merits a judgment, and rightly so. And let not your anger degenerate into acrimonious vocabulary. Raca is the Aramaic equivalent of idiot or empty head. And to use such a term of derision against the brother is sanctioned for the intervention of the Sanhedrin by the one who taught with authority. Don't call people fool, because Gehenna was once a real place. It was a valley to the south of Jerusalem, where idolatrous kings sacrificed children until the reformer King Josiah wiped it out, and then it survived ever since as a allusion to hell, Gehenna. But it was, in fact, at one point a real place. If then you bring your gift to the altar, and there remember that your brother holds whatever against you, leave your gift there before the altar, and go first make peace with your brother, and then come and offer your gift. There are priorities and definite do's and don'ts for giving. You want to be careful. You want to have hatred in your heart, and to enter into the sacred precincts of God is an abomination in his sight. So go make peace with your brother. How dare you step foot in the house of God when you have these unreconciled differences with your brother? Now, brother is a broad term. It is not necessarily one's literal brothers. The Jewish people use it, and because he is no respecter of person, his brother is truly universal in scope. So it doesn't matter if it's your brother or your worst enemy. Get your peace with him before you set foot and bring gifts to God. Get your orders in priority, get them straight. Then, when you have that settled and reconciled, then come and offer your gift. Be well-minded with your opponent promptly while you are on the way with him, lest your opponent deliver you to the judge, and then the judge to the officer, and you be thrown into prison. Who wouldn't want that? Prison is not a pleasant place, although it is the place where people do their best writings. The epistles of Paul testify to the fact. Those are Philippians, Colossians, Ephesians, Philemon. But prison is a reality to be avoided. Only, no, it's not a terrible thing to go to prison for the right cause, but to go to prison for the wrong thing when it was avoidable and preventable because we were acrimonious and because we failed to make peace with someone who meant business and had the power to harm us, and that is a poor excuse for land. So, just make the first move. Don't, when others, don't treat it indifferently when others strike out and lash out at you. Just, get it, make the peace. We are called to be peacemakers. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Verse 9. Truly I say to you that you shall by no means get out of there till you have paid the last quarter. So he means business. He's telling him that the adversary means business, and it's not going to be pleasant or end well if you do not agree promptly and be a peacemaker, and just get it out of the way, get it over and done with. And we're going to save what comes after this because we want to give it the full tension and focus it deserves. And there's also a connection. So as we explain the outline of the law of Moses in degrees of severity, the thou shalt not, the final five, thou shalt not kill, he raises anger, the moral equivalent, the emotional root of murder. He does the same thing with lust and adultery, and then he talks about divorce, which is a borderline sexual sin, and then he talks about taking vows. So thou shalt not bear false witness. Remember, he is addressing his relationship to the law of Moses. But that's all the time we have for right now. Thank you so much for being here. Take care. Until next time, I'll see you then. Bye bye.